How can you improve your listening skills in English? And what's the best way to prepare for the IELTS listening and the TOEFL listening? Well, join me today with my special guest to find out. Hello, my name is Keith and I run the Keith Speaking Academy and the YouTube channel English Speaking Success, as well as a new channel, English Speaking Success Shorts. Go and check it out. So listening, right, is a really important skill when you're communicating in English. It's even more important if you're preparing for an exam like TOEFL or IELTS. If you don't know these exams, right, TOEFL and IELTS are similar in that they are tests to measure your level of English. If you want to go and study in a university abroad or possibly to immigrate to an English-speaking country, and also for some professional occupations that need a certain level of English. So today, to help you with your listening skills, I'm joined by Josh MacPherson, who is a teacher like myself, and he's also the head of TST Prep, which is an online school helping students prepare for the TOEFL exam. He talks about TOEFL IBT and TOEFL Essentials. If you want to find out more about the TOEFL exams, you can go to ets.org and find out more. If you want to know more about IELTS, you can go to ielts.org. We'll be talking about general listening skills for English, but also exam preparation. Josh is American. He's from New York, so he has a different accent from me, and he lives out in Japan with his wife and children. So as well as giving you some interesting insights to listening skills, we break up the conversation a little bit with some banter about being married to a person of a different nationality and how we bring up our children in those kind of situations. All very interesting stuff. So let's jump straight in, find out more about Josh and help you level up your listening skills. Great. So I'm here with Josh. Great. Josh, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Keith. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm okay. I'm hot because I'm in a hot room in Japan right now. There's not a lot of air conditioning here. So
that's right. You're living out in Japan. Which part of Japan are you in?
I'm in Kyoto right now, which is the kind of traditional kind of city, and in the suburbs of Kyoto.
Right. Great. So Josh, today, we're going to be talking about listening skills in English and in the TOEFL exam and the IELTS exam. Now, your organization is TST Prep. Tell us a little bit about you, your background and that organization.
Sure. So about me is, I went to school to get a degree in ESL, TESOL, teaching English as a second language, got my master's in the States, traveled abroad. I worked in Japan and Korea, that kind of thing. Worked at a school in New York called ASA College for the intensive English program there. And I was the academic coordinator. And while I was there, there was a TOEFL class. And the TOEFL class, so to get a student visa in the States, you have to to maintain your student visa, you have to be sitting in a room for 20 hours learning English, or learning something. So you have to be 20 hours a week in a room studying. And so some students want to take the TOEFL so they can go into other schools and universities. And so I was teaching TOEFL 20 hours a week. There was a class that was TOEFL every day, 4 hours a day.
Wow, that's why you're an expert.
Yeah, that's kind of how I learned so much about it. And so that's kind of what led me to doing more on YouTube and starting TST Prep. And then we built up a couple courses. We started with helping students with their TOEFL speaking, actually. So we would help them improve. So that was the big thing that has made us different, is that we really focus on trying to improve students' scores instead of just preparing them for the test, actually improving their strategy and also their English ability in general. And so that's kind of how we got started, and that's where we're at now.
Great. We'll talk more. So our focus today, we're going to look at building up listening skills and ideas for students to develop their listening skills. I mean, I think when it comes to exam prep, general listening skills, as well as particular ideas and tips for the exam. Maybe talking first of all about kind of general listening skills. So with your students, what do you say to them about developing their listening skills?
So yeah, so there's a difference between improving your listening skills for a test and then listening skills in general, and to make that distinction. So a lot of times, one good thing about a test is that it kind of lets you know where you're at, like how far away you are from what you want, your score and your ability. So if you're pretty far away from your score, it means you have to, like you said, improve your general listening skills. And there's one distinction that I make with students. I guess there's so many things to say. I'm trying to think where to start. But that there's extensive and there's intensive practice, right. and I think that's one important thing to think about, is that extensive is kind of watching things that you enjoy, that you like. You're surrounded by English, that you're watching movies, reading books. If you want to read a book, I don't know if you want to do that, but something like that. And you're doing things just for the enjoyment of it. And you're kind of getting a lot of input, and hopefully enjoyable input that is mostly comprehensible. Most research agrees that you should understand like over 95% of what the content of you're consuming to get the most benefit out of it. Right. A lot of students think like, if I understand about 70% of the text, it's okay. That's actually kind of hurting you more than it's helping, right. Because it's really hard to understand if you only understand 7 out of 10 words in a sentence. That it'd be very, very difficult. So that's one thing that I would usually talk to students about, just kind of some things that they think are helpful, that might be a misconception.
Right.
And a big one is trying to do something that's too difficult.
Right. So that's interesting. Comprehensible input. That's the creation theory, right? Around having comprehend the kind of level plus one idea. So, right. So you basically, if students are finding they're listening to something and it's really so difficult, they're not getting like even 50%, it's maybe better to actually not to be listening to that, to find other sources.
Right. I mean, if you enjoy it and it's engaging, great. Like that's the most important thing. I mean, if you don't understand most of it, but you love watching the show Friends, let's say, or something, right. Then keep doing it, because at least you're engaged and you're thinking about it. And so that is the best type of extensive input. Right. Because you understand most of it. There's a couple of things you hear, you're like, oh, I wonder what that is, or I'm not sure what that means, or I think I remember that. And then the intensive stuff is a bit different. The intensive stuff might be a little bit more painful, I would say, right, actual TOEFL practice or that kind of thing. So I would balance it between the two of, doing something that you enjoy, that's pretty easy, that you understand most of it. And the intensive stuff doesn't have to be difficult necessarily, but it won't be like just watching your favorite Netflix show. Right. It might be, like a TED Talk or something like that.
Yeah. Fantastic. So a quick question on the extensive, because sometimes I have my own ideas, but as students ask, should I be watching a film with subtitles or without subtitles in my own language or subtitles in English? What's your take on subtitles?
Never in your own language.
Okay.
Never, ever. Right. Because then you're just going to get lazy and you're just not going to do the work of trying to figure out what's going on. The only time I would say that it's recommended is if like you're tired and you don't want to deal with it, but you still want extensive practice. But for the most part, with subtitles is fine. I don't really have, unless you really want to focus on your listening. You could do a kind of practice where you listen without subtitles and then you play it back and you try to see if you were correct or not with the subtitles. Yeah. So usually when I study Japanese, for example, I watch a show and I make flashcards with the sentences that I want to study. Right. So there's apps, like there's a there's a tool on Google Chrome called there's a Chrome extension called Language Learning with Netflix,
Okay.
and you can just install that extension, and you can make flashcards from TV shows that you're watching. They have language learning with YouTube. It's the same exact thing. So for me, having really fun, engaging content is like the best thing. And there's so much out there that you don't really need to have like a special book, English book for that. You can find content on Netflix or YouTube or whatever. And now there's tools where you can actually make flashcards and do that kind of thing. So my biggest piece of advice would be to try to watch something and have a tool where you can make some flashcards that you can review something about it later.
That's fantastic. I like that. I mean, going back to my learning days of Spanish, I did the old fashioned, but it was the same thing. So I used to listen to series or TV films and then write down words as I heard them. And often they were words that I just studied or had seen somewhere else that seemed relevant or important for me. And I used to go back and listen again and write down like the collocation. So what was the word and which words were going together with it, and then ending up reviewing those. This, I'm showing my age, but this was before the days of flashcard, Anki and stuff like that. So I just used to write them down and review them. But basically now,
that's great.
With Anki or with, as you say, the language learning Chrome plugin, it's great. It makes it so convenient to review stuff, right? And to learn language.
Yeah. I mean, so for me, I'm studying Japanese kind of like an hour or two every day for the past, I've had time to study finally. But so for the past 8 months or so.
Wow.
And like with, no. If you're thinking about what you're doing, if you're thinking about the sentences, writing them down, reviewing them, that's the best thing. You're thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing, is that you're just kind of thinking and trying. That's one thing that I notice about using the Anki stuff and the flashcard decks that I think is a little bit of a hindrance, is that I'm kind of relying on the technology to tell me what to do instead of me kind of thinking about what I should be doing.
Right.
I think that that's the major benefit of what you were doing before with Spanish.
That's interesting.
How's your Spanish, by the way?
No está mal. No está mal.
Big question. So I guess it depends on the student, of course. But like when a student says like they're pretty far away from their IELTS score, so that maybe test prep is not the most practical thing right now. How should they go about improving their listening, would you say?
So I think one of the first things I would say to students is to create a listening habit. It's kind of what you said with your Japanese 2 hours a day, is just create a time where you're, for me, the same time every day, same place, where I'm going to spend 20 minutes doing a listening activity and having that habit, so you're doing it regularly to develop that skill. If you've identified that as a skill you need to develop and focus on. And then I guess having both, so you talked about extensive listening and intensive listening. I think a similar thing, as in listening to shorter texts and also to longer texts, because I find I like to do listening where I kind of take a minute of something and I just analyze that minute. So I listen to it 4 or 5 times, really, maybe writing down a word, getting the gist, repeating some of the phrases, and just really analyze that for a minute. And that might be my 20-minute study. And another day, my 20-minute study might be I listen to a 20-minute podcast, and I've got that extensive listening practice.
Right.
Because the thing is with IELTS is you have to be able to focus. I mean, it's a 30-minute test, right? There's no mercy. I mean, you are there for 30 minutes, question after question. You've got to be so focused on being able to listen. And if you only ever listen to your speaking partner or your classmate, and you don't spend like 30 minutes listening to extended pieces of text, you're not going to make it. So that balance, short text and long text of listening, I think is pretty important. And out of curiosity then, is the TOEFL, are the listenings all American accents, or do you have like different country accents?
So the TOEFL IBT, which is the traditional TOEFL test that everybody knows, and according to ETS loves, Is pretty straightforward. It's mostly North American accents.
Okay.
Once in a while they would have a British accent, but it was pretty rare.
Okay.
I haven't heard one in a while.
Right.
But they have this new test, the TOEFL Essentials test, and that has accents from all over. Some even AI, voice, speech to text, or no, text to speech.
Yeah.
So they have some of those as well. Australian, South African, British. So they have all these different accents, and they're kind of labeling it as a international test or whatever you want to call it. So the IBT is usually just American accents. But how about the IELTS? Is IELTS all over, or is that just
it's all over?
UK?
It's a common misunderstanding, right? That IELTS is a British test and therefore it's all British English. It's not at all. It's very much an international test, and so they deliberately have mainly your different standard Englishes. So you'll get Australian, Canadian, American, British, Irish, Scottish accents, all different accents, which I think is important for listening, because again, some people may just tend to listen to the BBC or the Voice of America, and they get focused on that one accent. And for IELTS, you've got to listen to everything. You've got to tune into Australian TV, South African, radios, whatever it is. You need a wide range of accents. Yeah.
And I mean, especially nowadays, you have to be able to communicate, not just a country that the first language is English, but, people who are both speaking their English as their second language. That's where you're going to do most of your communicating, actually, in my experience, a lot of people.
Totally agree.
So it's crucial.
I think it's invaluable also, just generally speaking, to be listening to even not non-standard accents, but accents from other countries, right?
Right.
The Japanese speaking English, the Chinese speaking English, the Indian speaking English, because as you said, 90% of English communication is between people who are using it as a second language. So that it's important to be open to that and to be used to that as well.
And what's really interesting is that I sometimes recommend for students who want to practice speaking, voice typing on Google Docs. So if they use Google Docs, they can do voice typing, and they can speak, and they can see if Google Docs is recognizing what they're saying. But they have different English accents, and it's not just what you would imagine, like UK and South Africa and Australia, but it's also like Nigerian English and Thai English and Vietnamese English. So they have the software that recognizes the patterns that a lot of speakers from different areas of the world and how they speak English. It's very interesting.
That is interesting. I'm going to try that. I haven't tried that yet.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, voice typing. Yeah, it's a nice little, especially for students who don't have a teacher to work with. It's a nice thing to practice shadowing or something like that.
Brilliant.
Nice. How did you end up there?
Wow, that's a long story. The short version is I lived in Spain in my 20s. About 10 years here as a teacher and trainer. Then I moved to Asia, and then I decided with my wife and family to come back to Spain about 3 years ago, because we love the country and it's a great place to live.
Really nice. Yeah. So you're so your wife is British as well, right?
She's not. No, my wife is Chinese.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and our daughter was born in Beijing, but she's a British national, and we all speak Spanish. It's a bit of a strain.
That's interesting. Yeah, my wife's Japanese. The kids were born in the States, in America, in New York, but now we live in Japan, and so the kids are confused a little bit,
right? Yeah.
So I guess it's kind of a similar situation for you as well.
It is.
This is something that I didn't know before we had kids and stuff, and this was a couple arguments that I'm American, so I'm used to kids being in a separate room.
Yeah.
Even when they're a baby, which my wife thought was ridiculous. And so that's one of the many sacrifices.
Well, I'm with you. I'm with you
Yeah,
because the cultural
yeah,
differences around bringing up children are huge in China and England.
yeah.
I think, yeah, maybe it's an Asian Western thing as well. Yeah, we've had our fair share of arguments, I'll say, about that.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sure.
Hi guys, how are you doing? Are you enjoying the video? How are your listening skills coming on? Can you understand everything? Maybe not everything. I know sometimes we get quite fast, right? But do remember on YouTube, just below this video, you can turn on the closed captions. Look for the CC symbol, and that will give you subtitles in English, which can help you with your understanding if you need it. Do remember to, on YouTube, to press the subscribe button, turn on notifications if you're enjoying this video. And also do check out my new channel, English Speaking Success Shorts. Very short videos to help you improve your English speaking skills in a very, very short time. Go and check it out. The link's down below. Right now, let's get back to this conversation with Josh. Let's talk a bit more about the two exams, the TOEFL and the IELTS exams, and kind of the intensive listening practice and preparation. I mean, IELTS has kind of 4 sections, and it's kind of, for listening, you basically get to listen to general English and academic English. You get to listen to one speaker giving a monologue, and conversation speakers, you know, for general and academic. What's it like in TOEFL?
Can I ask a question about IELTS?
Yeah.
So there's 2 tests. Is that both tests the same? The listening, the general and the academic. So the listening section is the same for both.
Exactly. General and academic listening is exactly the same, as is the speaking. So the speaking and listening tests are the same for academic modules and general modules. Okay,
I see. So with the listening, it's so for the I'll talk about the IBT. The essentials is new, so that it's kind of it's throwing me a curveball lately.
Okay.
I mean, it's different for the essentials test, but for the IBT, the traditional one is 5 listening passages. They separate it into 2 parts. It's 1 conversation, 2 lectures, 1 conversation, 1 lecture. The questions, you don't see the questions until after the listening. So it's important to take notes and to, you know, kind of be very focused while you're listening.
Okay.
And so the conversations all take place on campus. So it's all something to do with like university life. Conversations are usually between a student and a professor or a student and campus worker. They're about 3 or 4 minutes, followed by 5 questions. The academic talks are about 5 minutes, a range of academic topics, and they're followed by 6 questions. And, you know, what makes it so hard is that 5 minutes, I say it very quickly and simply, but it's a long time to sit and listen to somebody and to focus and then to remember all that information and try to use it to answer the questions. It's tough. So it's a tough test, tough listening session.
That's very interesting because that's a different approach from IELTS, because IELTS basically you get to read the questions first. And one of the key strategies is to read the questions first carefully and be guessing what the answers could be, right? I mean, when you read the questions at the beginning, first it gives you the context, so you can activate your schemata. You can be thinking about, if the topic is global warming, what's the language you know? What are the things you know about it? But as you're reading, you can look at the gaps and go, oh, this is probably a verb. This is probably a noun. Oh, this is a number. And you're getting ready to listen. That's a key skill. For TOEFL, then, that's not applicable. So for your kind of listening, what's the strategy?
You know, so I guess, you know, what you're doing is I forget the terminology for it right now, but like kind of prepping, like before you listen, kind of thinking about what are the questions and what does that mean? Taking guesses about what you think the listening will be about based on the questions, that kind of strategy.
Mm.
We do encourage students to do a similar thing. Just kind of understanding the structure of the listening passages,
Right.
so they know that they should be looking for something. So, for example, they're going to know that one question after the conversation will be, what was this about? What were they talking about?
Okay.
And so you want to listen for that. You want to listen that the student will probably have a problem, and the campus worker is going to offer some solutions to that problem. So you want to listen for those things.
Right.
So by becoming more familiar with the test structure, you can kind of organize your notes a little bit better, and also organize your thinking beforehand of what you want to find.
Right.
Same thing with lectures. It's you want to figure out what's the main idea. What is the professor hoping the students learn by the end of this?
Yeah.
How does the professor illustrate this topic with probably 2 examples? And try not to focus too much about, they shouldn't ask like a very detailed question like, what year was this invented? It shouldn't be that specific, but it's kind of like, why does the professor say this, or what is implied about this? So it's more kind of getting the gist of what you're listening to and the structure.
Right. That's interesting. So it's listening for gist is really important for that.
Yeah, both general and specific. Yeah, like so general in the sense of like the gist of the whole passage, and more specific, like, kind of why does the professor organize the lecture this way, or,
Right.
what were the questions like here? So
it reminds me actually of a technique I was taught as a teacher. Somebody taught me to do it, was when listening to a passage, as you're listening to the passage, to try and write the answer to the 5 W questions, like who, when, what, where.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Who is it? It's John. What's happening? Where are they? And
right.
That kind of practice activity. And that was for general listening skills. But actually, it sounds like that would be the kind of thing might help in a TOEFL listening.
Yeah, I think it would. Sometimes with strategy, students get so caught up in the strategy that they forget they're supposed to listen.
Right.
So like sometimes with advice like find who, what, where, when, why, like they're trying to find who, what, where, when, why, and they're forgetting that they're just supposed to understand what they're listening.
Right.
So it does. I've heard a lot of advice that tends to get into a kind of minefield where people take it a bit too literally and then forget that they're supposed to just understand what they're listening to.
Right.
And so and the biggest challenge of that is taking notes and listening at the same time. So that's a skill that is hard to do. I don't know, in IELTS, do they have to take notes when they listen? Are they allowed to take notes? Is that a skill that you have to teach them?
You're allowed to take notes, but rather than taking notes on the listening, because you already see the question, you would be filling in you're
just trying to answer them.
Answers.
Okay.
So you're hearing, there's a sentence with a word missing. The thing is, the word missing may not be the same word in the listening, because it's probably a synonym or a paraphrase.
Right.
And you've got to get the general idea and then write down a word that fits. I think an exam thing for IELTS is to look at the instructions, because they have these instructions that say add 1 word, or use maximum 2 words, or put in a word and a number. And you've got to really look at the instructions. And then when you're making your notes or filling in the gaps, make sure you get it right according to the instructions. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So for us, the instructions are always the same in TOEFL. So we actually say, don't bother with the instructions.
Right. It makes it easier. It does. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't even read them. They're always the same. Yeah.
So with TOEFL, if you're doing kind of a listening class with TOEFL students, What advice are you giving them? What strategies are you giving them?
When they come to class, usually it's very much like a workshop, and we assign homework to students that's a mix of these kind of short activities that we make in house, which is like, for example, one activity is transcription. They have to try to transcribe a 20-second passage.
Right.
That's an academic passage. So they can listen as many times as they want, but they should try to transcribe it. And that skill is just kind of building listening skills in general. And also getting used to patterns in the way people speak. Maybe you don't notice when some speakers bring words together, that kind of thing, drop sounds. And so we do that type of practice. We also do finding the main idea of a short passage, about 30 seconds or less. And so we go through those type of activities as well. So very practical test prep kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I was reading the other day about a listening tip, which was a good tip. But so he talked about noticing the structure, or what we call the discourse markers, like the things that connect the sentences. Like, first of all, I'm going to talk about this. After that, finally, and noticing the discourse markers to help you structure and understand the structure. It's a great tip, but in a way, the tip on its own is not enough, because unless you practice that like 10 times on 10 different texts, it's going to be no use for you. So I think, yes, the tips are good, but it's putting them into practice, 10 times, 10,000 times. Have you heard of the 10,000 hours, right? That kind of idea of
mastery.
Mastery. It's not that students need 10,000 hours of English, but to master anything, yes, you need to put in time and practice, I think.
Like you said, I think that the one thing that you harp on a lot, which I think is great, is that you really want to enjoy it. I think one good thing about a test is that it really is a good measurement of your skill. But yeah, the prep part of it, can be not so much fun. And so you want to try to balance that. Like you say about kind of enjoying what you're doing, enjoying the process is so important, because if you're going to be spending a couple hours doing something every day and you're miserable doing it, you're not going to want to do it. What do you recommend for students to kind of, we touched on it a little bit, but what do you recommend for students who want to enjoy studying the IELTS? What are some things that you would recommend for them for listening?
It's a very good question. So I think when it comes to general listening, you need a balance between things you enjoy, so your favorite Netflix series, but also things that will probably come up. I mean, so you need to be able to understand a wide range of topics, right? People talking about climate change or science or history. So trying to get a balance between what you like and things that maybe interest you less, but you need to listen to them. But finding, I mean, there are websites I think which are great. I mean, I don't know, there's the ELO website, which is listening library. Yeah. It has a wealth of stuff, and it's really good because it has all sorts of stuff. It's very natural English. It's not scripted, and that's the other problem with films, right? Films are scripted, so they're not really really natural English. So you want to be careful on not just watching films, but looking for stuff that is entertaining, and I guess when you're learning and practicing, to try and take control of your learning so that you're doing it in a way that you enjoy. So if, for example, you really enjoy flashcards and you like working with flashcards and you like designing them and writing them, then use flashcards. But if that doesn't work for you, don't do it. If you're more into word lists, so the traditional 20 words in a list and you write them down, and if that works for you, then do it. So try and find out what works for you and what you enjoy doing. It's so important because it goes, I think it's Stephen Creation again, the effective filter, that the idea that if you're stressed, your learning goes down. And if you're relaxed, your learning ability goes up. And it's as simple as that. And so it's finding a way of controlling your learning and doing it in a way that you like.
Yeah. And I think that that's another thing too, is with listening. And I think you mentioned this in a video of yours before. This obsession with being correct. Try to be careful with that. If it can go overboard,
Yep.
and like if you care too much about being correct all the time, so for example, if you're doing TOEFL listening or IELTS listening, and you hear a word that you don't know, and then you're thinking like, what was that word? I know that word. What was that? Oh, now you're not listening to what's going on. Now you're thinking about that word. So you kind of have to be comfortable with not knowing everything that's going on.
Yes.
When you're listening to another language, which is tough. It's hard to do.
It is tough, and it's funny, and it comes from school, right? I mean, my daughter learns French at school, and I speak French, and now and again I speak to her in French, and she says, "Oh, you can't say that, Daddy. We've not studied that yet." And I'm like,
right.
But in real life, it's not just what you study; it's being exposed and being comfortable, not knowing everything.
Right.
So yeah, I think that is important actually, that you're not obsessing, and not when you're listening. Don't be always looking up every word, because that's not listening skill. That's vocabulary learning. So, be clear why you're listening. If you're listening to learn vocabulary, great. Look up every word. If you're listening to develop your skills of listening, don't look up every word. It's a different.
Sure.
Yeah. Great. Well, Josh, I think we're going to start winding up. For students to find out more about you and about TOEFL, maybe, where should they go?
Sure. So, our site, tstprep.com, it has, on the site, there's a free sample test that you can check out, the TOEFL IBT, and we're making TOEFL Essentials stuff now as well. And you can also check the site. We're going to start doing Duolingo in a couple months, and and hopefully people enjoy it and find it helpful. And so tstprep.com, and also our YouTube channel. I'm there talking to a screen.
Brilliant. Go and check all of those out. Sounds fantastic. Josh, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for coming along and sharing your thoughts on listening skills.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, take care. All the best.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
There we are. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found this video useful, then you should watch this video with another teacher, Datio from Vietnam, and we're having a conversation about IELTS speaking. That's it. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in a few moments in the next video. Take care now. Bye-bye. Oh dear. Is it TEFL, TAFL, TOEFL, TOEFL? Oh dear. It's not TEFL, right? Because that's a teacher's qualification. Right, yeah. And it's not tofu, because that's a kind of food. Dear, oh dear. It must be TOEFL, right? Gosh, I hope so. Anyway, there's only a few thousand people watching.